The morning alarm went off at 5:30, just like it had every day for the past 3 months. Rebecca groaned and reached over to silence it, her hand resting on her rounded belly as she tried to sit up. 7 months pregnant, and she felt every single day of it. Her back ached, her feet were swollen, and the baby seemed to enjoy using her ribs as a soccer goal at the most inconvenient times. She looked over at her husband Daniel, still asleep beside her. His face looked peaceful, but she could see the worry lines that had deepened over the past few weeks. Ever since the company laid him off, those lines had become permanent fixtures. She didn't want to wake him. He'd been up late again, scrolling through job listings, sending out applications, trying to find something, anything, that would help them get back on their feet. Rebecca pulled herself out of bed, wincing as her feet hit the cold floor. The bathroom mirror showed a woman who looked far more tired than 32 years should allow. Dark circles under her eyes, hair that needed washing, a belly that seemed to grow bigger every day. She splashed cold water on her face and tried to summon the energy she'd need for another 14-hour day on the film set. Working in film production had always been demanding. Long hours, constant pressure, everything needing to happen yesterday. But being a production assistant while 7 months pregnant, that was a whole different level of exhaustion. Rebecca coordinated schedules, managed equipment, made sure everyone had what they needed when they needed it. It meant being on her feet constantly, running from one end of the lot to the other, carrying things that were definitely too heavy for someone in her condition. Her doctor had been clear at the last appointment. "You need to slow down," she'd said, her voice firm but kind. "Your blood pressure is elevated and you're showing signs of stress. This isn't good for you or the baby." Rebecca had nodded, promised she'd try to take it easier. But what choice did she have? They had bills piling up. The baby would be here in 2 months, and babies weren't cheap. They needed diapers, clothes, a crib, a car seat. The list went on and on. With Daniel out of work, her paycheck was the only thing keeping them afloat. Her maternity leave would be unpaid, which meant she had to work as long as possible, save every penny she could, and hope it would be enough to get them through those first few months. She made herself a quick breakfast. Nothing fancy, just toast and some fruit. Her appetite had disappeared somewhere around month 6, replaced by constant heartburn and a stomach that seemed to have shrunk to the size of a walnut. She packed a lunch, filled her water bottle, and grabbed her work bag. By 6:15, she was out the door, driving through the quiet Los Angeles streets toward the studio lot. The production she was working on was a big one. Major studio, well-known director, a star-studded cast. It was the kind of project that could open doors if she did well, the kind of credit that looked good on a resume. But right now, all she could think about was making it through the day without collapsing. She arrived at the lot by 7, the sun just starting to peek over the horizon. The place was already buzzing with activity. Crew members unloading equipment, actors heading to makeup, directors reviewing shot lists. The energy was electric, the kind of organized chaos that came with high-stakes filmmaking. "Morning, Rebecca," called out Tom, one of the camera operators. He was a good guy, always friendly, always ready with a joke. "How are you feeling today?" "Oh, you know," she said with a tired smile. "Living the dream." He laughed, but she could see the concern in his eyes. Everyone on the crew had been watching her, noticing how hard she was pushing herself. Some had offered to help, but there was only so much they could do. Everyone had their own jobs, their own responsibilities. The production didn't slow down just because someone was pregnant. Her first task of the day was coordinating the equipment delivery for an afternoon shoot. That meant checking inventory lists, confirming that everything had arrived, and making sure it all got to the right location at the right time. She walked across the lot, clipboard in hand, checking items off one by one. With each step, her feet throbbed. With each box she verified, her back ached a little more. By mid-morning, she was already exhausted. The baby was active today, kicking and squirming, making it hard to focus. She found a quiet corner and sat down for a moment, pressing her hand against her belly. "Take it easy in there," she whispered. "Mama's trying to work." Rebecca didn't see him at first. Her eyes were focused on the ground, watching her own feet take one painful step after another. The equipment case felt like it was getting heavier with each passing second, and her arms were shaking from the effort. She could feel sweat dripping down her back despite the breeze that occasionally swept across the lot. "Excuse me, are you okay?" The voice startled her. She looked up, squinting against the afternoon sun, and her breath caught in her throat. Standing in front of her with genuine concern written across his face was Keanu Reeves, the star of the film, the reason half the crew was even here, and he was looking at her like she was the most important person on the lot. "Oh, I'm fine," she said automatically, the response programmed into her after years of not wanting to be a burden, just moving some equipment. But even as she said it, she swayed slightly. The dizziness was getting worse. She tightened her grip on the case, determined not to embarrass herself by collapsing in front of one of the biggest movie stars in the world. Keanu's eyes dropped to the heavy case in her hands, then to her very obviously pregnant belly, then back to her face. His expression shifted from concern to something that looked almost like alarm. "Here, let me take that," he said, already reaching for the case. No, really. "I've got it," Rebecca protested, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. "You don't need to do that. I'm just doing my job. And I'm just being a decent human being," Keanu said simply. His hands were already on the case, gently but firmly taking it from her. The relief in her arms was immediate and overwhelming. "You shouldn't be carrying something this heavy. Nobody should be asking you to do this." Rebecca felt tears prick at her eyes, and she blinked them back quickly. She couldn't cry. "Not here, not now. Not in front of him. They didn't ask me," she admitted. "Everyone else was busy, and this equipment needs to be at the soundstage. It's my job to make sure it gets there." Keanu looked at the case in his hands, then back at the trailer where 5 more cases were still stacked. "How many of these were you planning to carry?" "All of them," she said quietly. He was quiet for a moment, and she couldn't read the expression on his face. Then he set the case down carefully and pulled out his phone. "Give me 1 second," he said, and stepped away to make a call. Rebecca stood there, feeling awkward and embarrassed. She should be grateful, and she was, but she also felt like she'd failed somehow, like she couldn't even do her job properly. She pressed a hand to her lower back, trying to ease the ache that had settled there permanently over the past few weeks. Keanu finished his call and walked back to her. "Okay, I've got a couple of grips coming over to move these cases. They'll have them at the soundstage in 15 minutes. He looked at her closely. "When's the last time you sat down?" She tried to remember. "Breakfast?" No, she'd eaten standing up in the kitchen. The drive to work didn't count. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Come on," he said, gesturing toward his trailer. "You need to take a break." "I can't," Rebecca said automatically. "I have too much to do. The afternoon shoot is in an hour, and I need to make sure everything's ready. And there's a schedule change that needs to be communicated to half the crew. And all of that can wait 10 minutes, Keanu interrupted gently. "Please just sit down for a few minutes. Drink some water. Let someone else handle things for a moment." There was something in his voice, a kindness that wasn't pushy or demanding, just sincere. And honestly, Rebecca was so tired that she didn't have the energy to argue anymore. She nodded and he smiled. The kind of smile that made it clear why he'd been a movie star for decades. His trailer was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the lot outside. He pulled out a comfortable chair and helped her sit down, which she appreciated because lowering herself into chairs had become a complicated operation. Then he handed her a bottle of cold water from a small fridge. "Thank you," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The water was perfect, and just sitting down felt like a miracle. She could feel her heartbeat starting to slow, her breathing becoming easier. Keanu sat down across from her, not in a way that felt intrusive, just present. "How far along are you?" he asked. 7 months, Rebecca said, rubbing her belly absently. 2 more to go, and honestly, it can't come soon enough. "My sister had 2 kids, Keanu said. I remember visiting her during both pregnancies. She used to say that being pregnant was like running a marathon every single day. Except the marathon never ends and everyone expects you to act normal." Rebecca laughed, surprised by how accurate that description was. "That's exactly what it feels like. Except I'm also actually working 14-hour days on top of the never-ending marathon." His eyebrows rose. 14 hours? Every day? She nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "I'm trying to save up as much as possible before maternity leave. My husband lost his job a few weeks ago, so we're down to 1 income, and maternity leave is unpaid. So I need to work as long as I can to build up enough savings to cover the time I'll be off." She wasn't sure why she was telling him all this. Maybe it was the exhaustion breaking down her normal filters. Maybe it was because he actually seemed to care, which was more than most people in her life right now. Or maybe she was just so tired of carrying everything alone that it felt good to say it out loud to someone. "I'm sorry," Keanu said, and the way he said it made it clear he really meant it. That's a lot of stress to be dealing with, especially right now. "It is what it is," Rebecca said, trying to sound matter-of-fact about it. "We'll figure it out. We always do. I just need to make it through the next few weeks, save every penny I can, and then hopefully we'll have enough to get through the first few months after the baby comes. Daniel will find something eventually. He's good at what he does. The job market is just tough right now." Keanu was quiet for a moment, seeming to think about something. Then he said, "What's your name?" "Rebecca," she said. "Rebecca Chen. I'm one of the production assistants." "Well, Rebecca, I want you to know that what you're doing is incredibly hard, and you shouldn't have to do it alone." He stood up and walked over to a small desk in the corner of the trailer, pulling out a notepad. "I'm going to talk to the production manager about your schedule. There's no reason you should be working 14-hour days in your condition, and we need to make sure you have support, people who can handle the heavy lifting and the running around." "You don't have to do that," Rebecca said quickly. "I don't want special treatment. I don't want people thinking I can't do my job." "This isn't special treatment," Keanu said firmly. "This is basic human decency. Everyone on this set matters, and that includes you. Especially you right now." He paused, then added, "And for what it's worth, from what I've seen, you're incredible at your job. But being incredible at your job doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your health or your baby's health to prove it." Rebecca felt the tears coming again, and this time she couldn't stop them. They rolled down her cheeks as weeks of stress and exhaustion and fear finally found a release. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said. "Hormones. Don't apologize," Keanu said gently. He handed her a tissue. "You're dealing with a lot. It's okay to feel overwhelmed." They sat there for a few more minutes, and Keanu asked her about the baby, whether she knew if it was a boy or girl, if they had names picked out. Normal questions, but asked with genuine interest. It was the first real conversation Rebecca had had in weeks where someone actually seemed to care about her as a person, not just as someone who could get things done. When she finally stood up to leave, feeling more rested than she had in days, Keanu walked her to the door. "I mean what I said," he told her. "I'm going to talk to the production manager, and if you need anything at all, you come find me, okay?" Rebecca nodded, not quite trusting herself to speak without crying again. She stepped back out into the afternoon sun, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel quite so alone. Rebecca didn't expect anything to change. Sure, Keanu had been kind to her, incredibly kind, but he was busy. He had a movie to make, scenes to film, lines to memorize. She figured their conversation would be a one-time thing. A nice moment she'd remember when things got tough. She went back to work that afternoon feeling a little lighter, but still prepared to push through the same exhausting routine. She was wrong. The next morning, when she arrived on set, there was a chair waiting for her. Not just any chair, but one of those really comfortable director's chairs with padding and back support. It was positioned near the main area where she usually coordinated activities, and it had her name written on a piece of tape on the back. Tom, the camera operator, grinned when he saw her notice it. "Special delivery this morning," he said. "Came with specific instructions that you're supposed to actually use it." Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. "Who brought it?" Tom just shrugged, but his smile said he knew exactly who was responsible. "Let's just say someone wants to make sure you're taking care of yourself." Throughout that day, Rebecca found herself actually sitting down between tasks. At first she felt guilty about it, like she should be doing more, moving faster, working harder. But every time she started to get up after only a minute or two, someone from the crew would gently remind her that she was supposed to rest. It was like the entire set had collectively decided to watch out for her. The next day brought another surprise. Rebecca's schedule had been adjusted. Instead of arriving at 7 and leaving at 9, she was now scheduled for 8 to 6. Still a long day, but 2 hours made a huge difference. When she asked the production manager about it, he'd simply said, "Orders from above. We're bringing in an additional assistant to cover some of your responsibilities." Rebecca knew exactly who those orders had come from, but the biggest change was Keanu himself. He didn't just forget about her after that one conversation. He checked in on her regularly, not in an intrusive way or in a way that made her feel singled out, but genuinely. He'd stop by during breaks, ask how she was feeling, make sure she had water. Sometimes he'd bring her snacks from the craft services table. things he thought she might like. "You need to keep your energy up," he'd say with that warm smile. One afternoon, about a week after their first real conversation, Rebecca was reviewing some paperwork when Keanu walked over. "How's your day going?" he asked. "Better," she admitted. "A lot better, actually. The new schedule is helping, and having someone to share the workload with makes a huge difference." "Good," Keanu said. He seemed genuinely pleased. "And how's the baby doing?" "Active," Rebecca laughed, pressing a hand to her side where the baby had just delivered a particularly strong kick. "I think we've got a future soccer player in here." Keanu's face lit up with interest. "Do you know if it's a boy or girl yet?" "We're waiting to be surprised," Rebecca said. "Daniel and I figured we've got enough plans and schedules in our lives. This is one thing we want to just let happen naturally." "That's nice," Keanu said. Then more quietly, "How is Daniel doing?" "With the job search?" Rebecca was touched that he remembered, that he'd actually listened and cared enough to follow up. "He's got a few interviews lined up," she said. "Nothing solid yet, but he's hopeful. It's just taking longer than we expected." Keanu nodded thoughtfully. He seemed to want to say something, then changed his mind. "Well, keep me posted. And remember, if you need anything, I'm here." The pattern continued over the following weeks. Keanu's kindness became a constant presence in Rebecca's workday. He'd carry things for her without being asked. If he saw her looking tired, he'd insist she take a break. Once, when she mentioned feeling dizzy, he walked her to a shaded area, made her sit down, and brought her juice and crackers. He sat with her for 20 minutes, just talking about normal things, making sure she was okay before he let her go back to work. The crew noticed, of course. How could they not? But instead of it creating any weird dynamic or jealousy, it seemed to set a tone for the entire production. If the star of the film cared about a production assistant's well-being, then everyone else started paying more attention too. People offered to help Rebecca more often. They checked in on her. They made sure she wasn't overexerting herself. Linda, one of the makeup artists, pulled Rebecca aside one day during lunch. "You know," she said, "I've worked on a lot of sets with a lot of big-name actors, and I've never seen anyone treat crew members the way Keanu treats people. He actually sees us. He remembers our names, asks about our lives, cares about what happens to us. That's rare in this business," Rebecca nodded. She'd been thinking the same thing. In an industry where production assistants were often invisible, treated as interchangeable parts of a machine, Keanu had made her feel valued. He'd made her feel like she mattered. One particularly challenging day, about 3 weeks after they'd first met, Rebecca was dealing with a crisis. A key piece of equipment had malfunctioned and they needed a replacement immediately. She was on the phone trying to coordinate a rush delivery, while also managing 3 other urgent issues. The stress was building and she could feel her blood pressure rising. The baby was kicking up a storm, clearly picking up on her anxiety. Keanu appeared at her elbow. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Equipment failure," Rebecca said, covering the phone's mouthpiece. "I'm trying to get a replacement, but the earliest delivery is 4 hours and we need it in 2. "Let me make a call," Keanu said. He pulled out his phone and stepped away for a moment. Rebecca continued her own call, finally getting the delivery time pushed up to 3 hours, which was still not great, but better than 4. When Keanu came back, he looked satisfied. "I've got someone bringing a replacement from another studio. They'll be here in 90 minutes, Rebecca stared at him. "How did you do that?" He shrugged. "I know some people. Made a few calls. No big deal." But it was a big deal. It saved the production hours of delays and saved Rebecca from what would have been a nightmare of rescheduling and coordination. "Thank you," she said, and meant it more than he probably realized. "We're a team," Keanu said simply. "When one person struggles, we all help. That's how it should work." Later that week, Rebecca had her regular prenatal checkup. She'd been dreading it, worried that her doctor would scold her again about her stress levels and working too much. But when the doctor checked her blood pressure, she looked surprised. "This is much better," she said, checking the reading again. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Your stress levels are way down from last time." Rebecca knew exactly why. The reduced hours helped. Having support at work helped. But mostly it was knowing that someone cared, that she wasn't alone in this struggle, that there were people looking out for her. She thought about telling Daniel about Keanu's kindness, about how much he'd been helping her. But every time she started to bring it up, She worried it might make him feel bad. He was already dealing with the stress of being unemployed, of feeling like he wasn't providing for his family. She didn't want him to feel worse knowing that a stranger was taking care of his wife when he couldn't, so she kept most of it to herself. Just mentioning that work had gotten a bit easier, that her schedule had been adjusted. Daniel seemed relieved by that news, happy that she wasn't pushing herself as hard. As Rebecca's 8th month of pregnancy arrived, she started thinking about her last few weeks on the job. The baby was due in about 6 weeks, and she planned to work until the very end, or at least as close to it as possible. Every day she worked was another day of pay, another bit of money in their savings account. But she also found herself feeling sad about leaving, which surprised her. She'd always known this job was temporary, just something to get her through until the baby came, but it had become more than that. The people she worked with had become like family, and Keanu, well, his kindness had meant more to her than she knew how to express. One afternoon, as she was organizing schedules for the following week, Keanu sat down in the chair next to hers. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course," Rebecca replied. "When are you planning to finish up here? Before the baby comes?" "I'm hoping to work until about 2 weeks before my due date," Rebecca said. "That gives me a little buffer in case the baby comes early but still maximizes the time I can work." Keanu nodded slowly. "And after the baby comes, how long are you planning to take off?" "I'm not sure yet," Rebecca admitted. "As long as we can afford, I guess. Probably a few months if we can make our savings stretch that far." He was quiet for a moment, and Rebecca could tell he was thinking about something. But before she could ask what, someone called him back to the set. He stood up, gave her a gentle pat on the shoulder, and walked away. Rebecca watched him go, grateful beyond words for everything he'd done for her, and having no idea that his kindness was about to extend far beyond anything she could have imagined. Rebecca's last day on set arrived faster than she expected. 8.5 months pregnant now, she'd pushed herself as far as she could. Her doctor had been firm at the last appointment. 2 more weeks maximum, she'd said. Then you need to be home resting, preparing for the baby. So here she was, her final Friday on the production. The baby was due in 3 weeks, and she'd be spending that time at home, trying to relax, trying not to worry about money, trying to prepare for the massive life change that was coming. The crew had been sweet all day, stopping by to wish her well, to tell her they'd miss her. Several people had brought small gifts, baby clothes and blankets, cards with heartfelt messages. It made leaving even harder than she'd expected. These people had become her work family over the past few months, and walking away felt like leaving a part of herself behind. Around 4 in the afternoon, Tom came by her station. "Hey, there's a little gathering in the break area," he said with a knowing smile. "People want to say goodbye properly." Rebecca felt tears spring to her eyes immediately. Pregnancy hormones had made her cry at everything lately, from touching commercials to the sight of baby socks. "You guys didn't have to do anything," she said, but she was already standing up, following Tom toward the break area. When she walked in, the room erupted in applause. About 30 crew members were there, and they decorated with streamers and balloons. There was a cake on the table, and a pile of wrapped presents that made Rebecca's heart clench. These people barely made more than she did, and they'd spent their hard-earned money on gifts for her baby. "Speech," someone called out, and others joined in. Rebecca laughed through her tears. "I'm terrible at speeches," she said, "but I just want to say thank you. Thank you for making these last few months bearable. Thank you for looking out for me. Thank you for being the best crew anyone could ask for." Her voice cracked. "I'm going to miss you all so much." More applause, and then people started coming up to hug her, to offer final well wishes. Linda, the makeup artist, pressed a small box into her hands. "For the baby," she said. "Something special." Rebecca was about to open it when she noticed Keanu standing at the edge of the group. He'd been there the whole time, she realized, just watching quietly. When their eyes met, he smiled and walked over. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked quietly. "In private?" Rebecca nodded, curious. They stepped out of the break room and walked toward his trailer. Her heart was beating fast, though she wasn't sure why. Maybe it was just the emotion of the day, the finality of leaving, the uncertainty of what came next. Inside the trailer, Keanu gestured for her to sit in the comfortable chair she'd come to think of as hers. He pulled out an envelope from his desk drawer and held it for a moment, seeming to gather his thoughts. I've been thinking a lot about your situation, he began. About you working so hard to save up for maternity leave. About your husband looking for work, about the stress you've been under. Keanu. You've already done so much, Rebecca started, but he held up a hand gently. Let me finish, he said with a soft smile. The crew wanted to do something for you. We all talked, and everyone contributed what they could. We wanted to make sure you had something to help you through the next few months. He handed her the envelope. Rebecca took it with shaking hands, not sure what to expect. Inside was a card, signed by what looked like every single person on the crew. But there was also a check, and when Rebecca looked at the amount, her breath stopped. It was $5,000. This can't be right, she whispered, staring at the numbers. This is too much. I can't accept this. It's already done, Keanu said gently. Everyone wanted to help. You've worked so hard for this production, Rebecca. You've made all of our jobs easier. Let us help you now. Rebecca was crying in earnest now, big tears rolling down her cheeks. $5,000. That would cover 3 months of expenses. Maybe 4 if they were careful. That was time with her baby without the crushing stress of bills piling up. That was breathing room. I don't know what to say, she managed through her tears. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. You don't have to say anything, Keanu said. He pulled out a tissue and handed it to her, just like he'd done that first day in his trailer. Just take care of yourself and that baby. That's all any of us want. Rebecca wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. She looked at the check again, at all the signatures on the card, and felt overwhelmed by the kindness of people she'd only known for a few months. Everyone on the crew contributed? She asked. Keanu nodded. Everyone who could. We all wanted to be part of this. What Rebecca didn't know, what she wouldn't find out until much later, was that while the crew had indeed contributed, the vast majority of the money had come from Keanu himself. He'd quietly covered most of the amount, then organized the crew contribution to make it feel like a group effort. He'd done it because he knew Rebecca would have a hard time accepting money from just him, that it would feel too much like charity. This way, it was a gift from her work family, something she could accept with pride rather than embarrassment. They sat together for a while longer, talking about the baby, about Rebecca's plans for the nursery, about names she and Daniel were considering. Keanu asked about her husband's job search, and Rebecca mentioned that Daniel had a final interview next week for a position that seemed promising. I hope it works out, Keanu said sincerely. But even if it takes a little longer, you'll be okay now. You've got some cushion, some time to breathe. Rebecca nodded, still clutching the envelope like it might disappear if she let go. I don't know how to repay this kindness, she said quietly. You don't repay kindness, Keanu said simply. You pass it forward. Someday, when you're in a position to help someone else who's struggling, you'll remember this moment and you'll help them. That's how it works. When Rebecca finally left the trailer, she felt like she was floating. The weight she'd been carrying for months, the constant anxiety about money and the future, had lifted. Not completely, maybe, but enough that she could breathe properly for the first time since Daniel had lost his job. She went back to the break room where the party was still going. People hugged her again, and she thanked them all individually, making sure each person knew how much their contribution meant. She cut the cake, opened the presents, and laughed at the silly advice people gave her about parenting. As the party wound down and people returned to work, Rebecca gathered her things from her workstation. She packed up the personal items she'd accumulated over the months, the photos of Daniel she'd taped to her desk, the motivational notes she'd written to herself on hard days. Tom helped her carry everything to her car. You take care of yourself, he said, giving her a careful hug around her belly. And send us pictures when that baby arrives. I will, Rebecca promised. I definitely will. The drive home felt surreal. She kept glancing at her purse on the passenger seat, where the envelope was safely tucked away. $5,000. It felt like winning the lottery. It felt like a miracle. When she got home, Daniel was in the kitchen making dinner. He'd been trying to take over more household responsibilities since he'd been out of work, and she appreciated it more than she could say. How was your last day? He asked, kissing her cheek. It was incredible, Rebecca said, and the tears started again. Happy tears this time. She pulled out the envelope and handed it to him. The crew took up a collection for us. Daniel opened the envelope and his eyes went wide. This is $5,000, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I know, Rebecca said, laughing through her tears. Can you believe it? They all contributed. They wanted to help. Daniel sat down heavily at the kitchen table, staring at the check. Then he started crying too, and Rebecca sat beside him and they held each other, both overwhelmed by the kindness of people who barely knew them but had chosen to care anyway. We're going to be okay, Daniel said finally, his voice thick with emotion. With this, and if I get that job next week, we're actually going to be okay. We are, Rebecca agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. We really are. That night, lying in bed with Daniel's hand resting on her belly, feeling the baby move beneath his palm, Rebecca thought about Keanu Reeves. She thought about how he'd seen her struggling that first day and had chosen to help, how he'd continued to help day after day in ways both big and small, how he'd organized this incredible gift that would change her family's life. She made a promise to herself right then. Someday, when she was back on her feet, when things were stable again, she would find ways to help others the way she'd been helped. She would pay attention to people who were struggling. She would offer kindness without being asked. She would be the person who stopped and helped carry the heavy load, because that's what Keanu had taught her. That's what this whole experience had shown her. Kindness wasn't just about big gestures or large amounts of money. It was about seeing people, really seeing them, and choosing to care. 3 weeks after her last day on set, at 2 o'clock in the morning, Rebecca's water broke. The rush to the hospital, the hours of labor, the pain and fear and excitement all blurred together into one overwhelming experience. But at 6:37 in the morning, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her daughter's first cry. They named her Grace. Partly because they'd always loved the name, but mostly because of the grace that had been shown to them when they needed it most. Daniel held his daughter with tears streaming down his face, and Rebecca watched them both, feeling a love so fierce it almost scared her. The first few weeks at home were exactly as hard as everyone had warned them. Sleepless nights, constant feedings, the overwhelming responsibility of keeping a tiny human alive. But underneath the exhaustion and the chaos there was joy, and there was something else too, the absence of crushing financial stress. Because of that gift from the crew, Rebecca could focus entirely on her baby without worrying about bills. She could heal from childbirth without rushing back to work. She could be present for these precious early weeks. Daniel got the job. The call came when Grace was 2 weeks old, and he'd actually shouted with relief when he hung up the phone. It wasn't quite as much money as his old position, but it was steady, had good benefits, and the company seemed solid. He started 3 weeks later, and suddenly their situation had gone from desperate to stable. When Grace was about 2 months old, Rebecca got a text from Tom, the camera operator from the film set. "The movie wrapped yesterday," he wrote. "Everyone's asking about you and the baby. We'd love to see pictures if you're willing to share." Rebecca sent him a photo of Grace sleeping, her tiny fist curled against her cheek. Within minutes, her phone was buzzing with responses from crew members. Messages of congratulations, heart emojis, people saying how beautiful Grace was. Linda, the makeup artist, sent a long message saying how much they all missed Rebecca and hoped she was doing well. "You should go visit them," Daniel suggested that evening. "Show off our daughter. Let them see how much their kindness meant." So the following week, Rebecca bundled up Grace and drove to the studio lot. It felt strange being back, walking through the gates with a baby in her arms instead of a clipboard and radio. The security guard recognized her and broke into a huge grin. "Is that the baby?" he asked. "Congratulations. She's beautiful." Word spread quickly that Rebecca was there. Crew members started appearing from all directions, wanting to see Grace, to meet the baby they'd all helped support. The love in that moment was overwhelming. These people, most of whom were working on new projects now, had taken time out of their busy days just to welcome her baby into the world. Tom took a photo of Rebecca surrounded by the crew, everyone smiling, baby Grace in the center of it all. "This one's going on the wall," he said. "Our good luck charm." But there was one person Rebecca really wanted to see, one person she needed to thank in person. She asked around and learned that Keanu had finished filming a week earlier and had already moved on to his next project. Her heart sank a little. She'd been hoping to introduce him to Grace, to show him the beautiful result of his kindness. "He left something for you, though," Tom said. He disappeared for a moment and came back with a small wrapped package and a card. "Said to give it to you when you came by." Rebecca's hands trembled as she opened the card. Inside, in Keanu's handwriting, was a simple message. Congratulations on your beautiful daughter. May she grow up in a world where kindness is the rule, not the exception. All the best, Keanu. The package contained a children's book, a beautiful hardcover edition of a classic story. On the inside cover, Keanu had written, "For Grace from her extended film family. Read this to her and remember that she came into the world surrounded by people who cared." Rebecca cried, of course. She seemed to cry at everything these days, but these were good tears. Grateful tears. The months passed. Grace grew from a tiny newborn into a chunky, smiley baby. Daniel thrived at his new job and even got promoted after 6 months. Rebecca eventually went back to work part-time, finding a position with better hours and less physical demand. Their lives settled into a new normal, one that included a beautiful daughter and a stability they'd once feared they'd never have. But Rebecca never forgot the kindness she'd been shown. She couldn't. Every time she looked at Grace, she remembered that crucial time when strangers had chosen to care. And she'd meant what she'd promised herself that night. She would pay it forward. She started small. When she noticed a young mom struggling at the grocery store, Rebecca helped her carry her bags. When a new employee at her job seemed overwhelmed, Rebecca took extra time to help her learn the ropes. She donated to fundraisers for families in need. She volunteered at a local organization that helped pregnant women without support systems. One day, about a year after Grace was born, Rebecca was at a coffee shop when she noticed a young woman crying at a corner table. She was very pregnant, talking urgently on the phone, and she looked absolutely desperate. Rebecca hesitated, not wanting to intrude, but something about the woman's situation reminded her so much of her own darkest days. She approached the table carefully. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said gently. "But are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help?" The woman looked up, startled, then burst into fresh tears. "I just lost my job," she said. "I'm 7 months pregnant and they let me go today. Budget cuts, they said. I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent next month." Rebecca sat down across from her. "What's your name?" she asked. "Melissa," the woman said, wiping her eyes. "Melissa, I want to tell you a story," Rebecca said. And she did. She told Melissa about being pregnant and desperate, about working until she could barely stand, about Keanu Reeves and a crew of kind people who had changed her life. She told her about the gift that had saved her family. "Why are you telling me this?" Melissa asked when Rebecca finished. "Because I want you to know that you're not alone," Rebecca said, "and because I want to help if you'll let me." She pulled out her phone. "I know some people, organizations that help women in your situation. Let me make some calls." Over the next few weeks, Rebecca became Melissa's advocate. She connected her with job resources, helped her apply for assistance programs, and even coordinated with some of her old crew contacts who were looking for part-time help. But more than that, she was just there. Someone Melissa could call when things felt overwhelming, someone who understood what she was going through. When Melissa's baby was born, a healthy boy she named Anthony, Rebecca was one of the first visitors at the hospital. She brought gifts, offered advice, and most importantly, brought hope. "I can never repay you for this," Melissa said, holding her son. "You don't repay it," Rebecca said, echoing the words Keanu had once said to her. "You pass it forward. Someday you'll help someone else who needs it." The story of Keanu's kindness didn't end with Rebecca. She told it often, not to gossip or seek attention, but to illustrate a point, that kindness matters, that small acts of caring can change lives, that we all have the power to help each other. A few crew members posted about the experience on social media, and the story went viral. Not because it was dramatic or scandalous, but because people were hungry for good news, for evidence that kindness still existed in the world. The story was shared thousands of times, always with the same message: be kind. Help others. See the people around you who are struggling. Years later, when Grace was old enough to understand, Rebecca told her the story of her name. She told her about the difficult time before she was born, about the kind man and the generous crew who had helped them when they needed it most. She showed her the book Keanu had given her, now well worn from years of bedtime readings. "Why did they help you?" Grace asked. "They didn't even know you very well." "Because that's what good people do," Rebecca explained. "They see someone who needs help and they help. They don't worry about whether they'll get thanked or recognized. They just do it because it's the right thing." "I want to be like that," Grace said seriously. You can be, Rebecca told her. We all can be. And that really was the point of the whole story. Keanu Reeves wasn't special because he was famous or wealthy. He was special because he chose to see someone who needed help and actually helped her. He was special because he treated a production assistant with the same respect and care he'd give anyone else. He was special because he understood that we're all connected, all part of the same human family, and taking care of each other isn't optional. It's essential. The ripple effect of his kindness continued to spread. Rebecca helped others who helped others who helped others. A simple act of caring multiplied into dozens, then hundreds of acts of kindness, all because one person had stopped to help a pregnant woman carry a heavy load. That's the real lesson. That's what Grace would grow up understanding. Kindness isn't just about grand gestures or large sums of money. It's about paying attention, about seeing people, about caring enough to act. It's about making the world a little bit softer for those who are struggling. And it starts with one person deciding that someone else's burden is worth sharing. That's what Keanu had done for Rebecca. That's what Rebecca was now doing for others. That's what Grace would someday do in her own way. The circle of kindness, once started, never really ends. It just keeps growing, touching more lives, creating more moments of grace in a world that desperately needs them. And somewhere, Keanu Reeves was probably helping someone else, creating another story of unexpected kindness, never seeking recognition, just doing what he believed was right because that's who he was. And because of him, that's who Rebecca had become too. The day progressed in a blur of tasks and deadlines. She coordinated with the lighting department about a last-minute change. She helped the props team locate a missing item. She answered what felt like 100 questions, solved a dozen small crises, and kept everything running smoothly. That was her job. Be invisible but essential. Keep the machine running without anyone noticing the effort it took. Lunch came and went. She ate her sandwich while walking between locations, barely tasting it. There wasn't time to sit down properly. The afternoon shoot was coming up, and there were still a million things to organize. She could feel her energy draining, her body screaming for rest, but she pushed through. She had to. There was no other option. Around 3 in the afternoon, disaster struck. Well, maybe disaster was too strong a word, but it felt like it at the time. A shipment of important equipment had been delivered to the wrong location on the lot. It needed to be at the main soundstage within the hour, and the delivery truck had already left. That meant someone had to move it manually. Several heavy cases, multiple trips, and guess who got volunteered for the job? Rebecca stared at the stack of cases and felt her heart sink. Each one had to weigh at least 40 pounds. There were 6 of them. She knew she shouldn't be lifting anything that heavy. She knew her doctor would have a fit if she found out. But everyone else was tied up with other critical tasks, and this equipment was needed now. She took a deep breath and picked up the first case. It was even heavier than she'd thought. She walked slowly, carefully toward the sound stage, her arms straining, her back protesting with every step. She made it about halfway before she had to stop, setting the case down and leaning against a nearby trailer. Her heart was pounding and she felt dizzy. The baby kicked hard as if in protest. Just breathe, she told herself. Just breathe and keep going. She picked up the case again and continued walking. One step at a time. That's all she could manage. One step, then another, then another. The soundstage seemed impossibly far away. Her vision blurred slightly at the edges. The California sun beat down on her, making her feel even more lightheaded. She was so focused on just putting one foot in front of the other that she didn't notice someone approaching. She didn't hear the footsteps. She was in her own world of exhaustion and determination, just trying to make it through this one task, then the next, until finally, somehow, the day would be over and she could go home and collapse. But sometimes, when you're at your lowest point, when you think nobody sees you struggling, when you feel completely alone in your fight, that's exactly when help arrives from the most unexpected places.